Now, I began this talk, which I'm about to end, by saying that for journalism to survive, professional journalism to survive, it needs to reinvent its economic model. It's not going to do it on advertising. I'll just take a couple minutes to just talk about this a little bit. The first thing is that most people who get into the economics of this believe that there is no one magic bullet. That the idea that you could charge for content will not solve all the problems. To give you an idea, newspapers today which charge for content in print, make 20% of their revenue, just 20% from circulation and subscription. So even if you got all the money you could get from print circulation, it wouldn't come close. And let's say you charged a lot more for that, which is not very realistic since people can't charge anything on the internet. You still have a very long way to go. So whatever these models are going to be, there are going to be a number of them probably. It's not one thing. Now what are these options? There's been a lot of discussion about nonprofit models and a lot of discussion about what we call micropayments, which would be paying for each piece of content along the way. I think both of these have problems. The problem with micropayments is we already know from the marketplace in this country and elsewhere that it's very hard for one news organization to charge for something when very similar information is free available somewhere else. And even if you think the New York Times is the best newspaper in America, the marginal difference between the New York Times account of that event and the AP account that's free, or the Reuters account, which is really going to be free, is not so great that you're willing to pay for one if the other is free. And the other problem with micropayments is you're discouraging use. It's not really what we want civically. We don't want to make people have to pay more for the more information they have. We want to encourage information consumption. A nonprofit model is difficult if what we mean by that is large institutions, charities paying for the news, is difficult because, just to give you a rough idea, newspapers took in about $45 billion in revenues last year. This is the devastated, struggling newspaper industry. Took in $45 billion in revenue and made, on average, 11% profit last year. Now, we know about the Boston Globe losing $83 million a year and all that, but most newspapers, which are smaller, are doing much better. If you got rid of the printing and delivery of the newspaper, you could probably save about half of your costs. The printing and delivery is about 40% of a newspaper's costs. There are some other savings and blah, blah, blah. But any way you look at it, you're looking at $15, $20 billion in revenues to operate newspapers at the levels that we think of them now, which is a diminished level. There isn't that much money in charitable organization, large institutional giving. Not even close. I mean, not even close. And to give it to something that's going to annoy you is a tough question. There are a lot of other options. What are some of these options I've looked at in the past? One is the cable model. What do I mean by that? In cable, you pay a subscription for the cable channel. It's embedded in your cable bill. So the analog to that would be embedded in your internet access fee. You pay $30 a month to whoever, Verizon, to get access to the internet. Maybe it's $40 a month and $10 goes to journalism. Now, there are a lot of problems with working out the mechanics of that, what's journalism, who's in, who's out, how much they get, et cetera, but it's not totally unfeasible, and I think that certainly the only chance that we have at this point in this marketplace to charge for content is at the one toll booth where we already pay money. And not every 50 feet along the road as you're trying to drive down that street. Retail mall is another idea, and what I mean by that is the newspaper creates a retail mall for its community, links a lot of local goods and services and retail that are not on the internet, that are not big box stores, that is not Best Buy, that is not Sleepy's, that don't have websites. Link them together, create what, in a virtual world, what you once did in a print world. Only allow people to actually purchase goods and services there. And if you do, a small fee goes to the news organization that created that market. Niche products, what do I mean by that? People think that Washington journalism has shrunk, and it has. Every newspaper has cut its Washington bureaus dramatically, shocking. But the number of journalists working in Washington is actually the same as it was 10 years ago. How is this possible? Because of the rise of niche newsletters, very targeted, that go to professional interests and pay large fees. So elites who want to have information about the news are getting it, paying a lot for it, usually to their company or their industry, as the public is learning less. The largest bureau in Washington, D.C. today is not the Associated Press, it's CQ, Congressional Quarterly, which produces 36 niche newsletters. Things like water quality and climate wine. And I'm sure all of you have many subscriptions to these exciting publications. There are no local news organizations trying to duplicate that model around the country. They could, but they're not. They've thought about what they call microsites, like mommy sites and things like that. But those are still aimed at a general interest audience, in specialized groupings. But this is something entirely different. And the last one that's a possibility is challenging aggregators. It's actually possible, right now, the technology exists, where every news organization in America could actually take its content out of Google. It's a very simple formula, and you can do it automatically. And then you couldn't get the news, you couldn't search the news from Google. The news industry could actually, theoretically, create its own search engine. They'll call it Newsle or something. If you wanted news, you'd go there. And all that search advertising that was built around news could be going to the news industry. But we're very far away from that prospect happening because nobody wants to challenge Google. They control so much of the marketplace that people are going to them and begging them, would you buy my company? Not, how dare you steal my revenue? So I think that I would finish with this. I'm sure that the people in this room could come up with other dots to put at the bottom of this list. The traditional news industry that I worked for, and that many of you work for, and some of you used to work for, have largely ignored these and other prospects and have let a lot of opportunities slip through their fingers. And more those of us who study this industry, some more darkly than I, say the news industry has brought this on themselves by missing these opportunities. It's operated like a mature, dying industry and has extracted profits, cut costs, managed costs, and not innovated for the last 15 years, and they've brought this on themselves. I think to some significant degree that's true, but I finish where I started. Had what we imagined happened was going to happen, frankly the news industry wouldn't have a chance because it would have lost its audience. It has not lost its audience. It has a very robust audience. If it can find a way to convert that audience that still believes in it into revenue in a new way, it has a chance. The situation is not good, but it frankly could have been a much, much worse than it is. Thank you.